Why do we declare dead that which we've never truly known? There's something peculiar about how history is handled under capitalism. Not just distorted, but buried. Buried so deep, even the bones are blamed for their own disappearance. The Communist Manifesto is one of those ghosts, not forgotten by time, but exiled by power. We are told it's outdated, dangerous, even laughable. Yet most have never touched its pages, never heard its words aloud. It was condemned before it was considered. Imagine a book so feared that merely reading it is seen as radical. A book not silenced because it failed, but because it exposed too much. That's not death, that's execution. And what does this reveal about our society? That it is not built on confidence, but on suppression. The ideas of collective ownership, of abolishing class structures, of reclaiming time and labor, are treated as heresies in a system that claims to cherish freedom. But what is freedom when the range of thought itself is dictated? A man in a suit stands in front of a burning library. He smiles as he tells you knowledge is dangerous. He offers you a TikTok instead. The manifesto isn't dead. It's alive in every unpaid overtime hour, in every eviction notice, in every worker who skips lunch to meet a deadline. It is not a relic, it is a mirror, and mirrors are threatening in a world built on illusion. Perhaps the question isn't, why did communism fail? But rather, why were we never allowed to understand it? What if the most powerful ideas ever written were kept from you? Not to protect you, but to protect the system. We are born into a story already written. By the time we learn to read, the books that could set us free have been covered in dust, their spines cracked by fear, their contents misrepresented by those who benefit from our ignorance. The Communist Manifesto is not just a book, it's an inheritance, one that was stolen from you, an inheritance of rebellion, of clarity, of structure, in a world that thrives on confusion. What Marx and Engels gave us wasn't prophecy, it was diagnosis, a scalpel that sliced through the illusion of equality, exposing the organs of exploitation beneath the skin of democracy. They didn't offer hope, they offered truth, and that is far more dangerous. In school, we're taught that history is a parade of progress, but what they never mention is whose progress. The manifesto didn't die because it was wrong, it was suffocated because it was right. Imagine a family heirloom sealed in a vault, and the vault guarded by stories that say, don't open it, it's cursed. But inside lies the blueprint to your emancipation. There's a reason you're taught that questioning capitalism is naive. There's a reason you were never asked to read the manifesto, only to mock it. Because if you had read it, you might have started asking questions that the system can't afford to answer. The ruling class doesn't fear revolution, it fears awareness. Because awareness cannot be unseen, and once you know, you can never unknow. So ask yourself, what else have they stolen from you in silence? What if the world you see isn't the world that exists, but a performance designed to keep you obedient? The Communist Manifesto dared to pull the curtain. It exposed capitalism not as a neutral force of progress, but as a stage, where wealth wears masks and labor breaks its back behind the scenes. Today, we still applaud the illusion, too distracted to notice that we're not in the audience. We're in the cast, and we're not getting paid. The manifesto names it plainly: class struggle. Not an abstract concept, but a daily reality. Between those who own and those who must sell their time to survive. Yet somehow, this idea is now radical. In a world where billionaires are seen as geniuses and the working poor are told to grind harder, clarity becomes rebellion. You're told capitalism is freedom, but if you stop moving, you starve. If you speak out, you're punished. If you question, you're labeled ungrateful. That isn't freedom, that's conditional survival. The manifesto is dangerous not because it lies, but because it names what others refuse to. That exploitation is not a glitch, it is the code. Picture a factory made of glass. Inside, workers move like ghosts, unseen by the world outside. Above them, a neon sign reads, "Opportunity." But the door only opens one way, and it locks behind you. Capitalism turns your life into raw material. Your time, your energy, even your dreams. Processed, packaged, sold. And still, we're told we're lucky to be here. So we ask, if this is freedom, why does it feel like a cage? Have you ever looked at your own life and felt like a stranger? That feeling has a name. Marx called it alienation, the disconnection between you and the world you help build, between your labor and your soul. It's not a flaw of capitalism. It's one of its finest achievements. In the manifesto, alienation isn't some poetic sorrow. It's a structural consequence. When you work not to create, but to survive, when your labor serves someone else's wealth, you begin to vanish. Slowly, quietly. You clock in, but leave your spirit behind. And now we live surrounded by screens. Connections everywhere, but intimacy nowhere. We share pieces of ourselves, but feel more alone than ever. The machine doesn't just want your time. It wants your attention, your mind, your identity. Imagine a man building a house he will never live in. Day after day, brick by brick, he finishes it, watches another family move in. He's paid just enough to keep going, but never enough to stop. That's not just a metaphor, that's modern labor. We create but own nothing. We build but are denied the fruits. We exist but only as long as we produce. Capitalism thrives on this disconnection, because if you felt whole, truly whole, you might start asking why your life feels broken. The manifesto doesn't romanticize the past. It doesn't promise utopia. It simply says, you are not the problem. The system is. So ask yourself, when did your life become a transaction? And who profits from your emptiness? Why do we love things that will never love us back? Marx called it commodity fetishism, the strange enchantment where objects take on lives of their own, and the people behind them vanish. In this spell, a brand has more power than a human face. A logo is more trusted than a neighbor. Value is no longer about use, it's about illusion. The manifesto predicted this long before we bought shoes named after millionaires, or paid monthly for phones that track our sadness. Under capitalism, a product isn't just a thing. It's a story, a symbol, a status. You don't just buy sneakers, you buy the idea of being seen. You don't just drink coffee, you sip identity. But behind every object is a chain of hands. And those hands are often invisible, calloused, underpaid, and forgotten. Think of a child assembling your electronics, never allowed to own one. A garment worker stitching joy into a shirt they'll never afford. We don't see them. We're not meant to. Instead, we see the billboard, the influencer, the smile, a marketplace built on suffering, but marketed as self-expression. And the most tragic part? We feel proud of our purchases, as if owning more proves we exist more. But consumption doesn't fill the hole. It deepens it, because the hunger capitalism creates is emotional, not material. The manifesto dares us to ask, what if things don't make us happy, but distract us from what's missing? So look around. How many of the things you own actually know who you are? Who told you that hard work equals success? Probably the same system that profits when you work yourself into silence. Capitalism is addicted to the myth of meritocracy, the fairy tale that those who succeed simply earned it, and those who suffer just didn't try hard enough. It sounds empowering, but it's really a trap, because if failure is always personal, then the system is never questioned. The Communist Manifesto tears this illusion apart. It shows that class isn't just about effort, it's about access, about power, about birth. A janitor can work 14-hour shifts for 40 years and still die in debt. A CEO can inherit a fortune and be celebrated as a visionary. Merit? Or maintenance of hierarchy? Think about the hours you've given, the weekends missed, the sleep sacrificed. Has it brought you dignity or just survival? This system doesn't reward the most virtuous. It rewards those positioned to exploit. And it teaches us to blame ourselves when we can't climb a ladder that was never ours to begin with. Imagine a race where one runner starts 10 miles ahead, and the others are told, if you don't win, It's your fault. That isn't a race. It's a ritual of humiliation. The manifesto doesn't just challenge economic injustice. It exposes the emotional violence of false hope. Because a lie repeated long enough becomes culture, and culture becomes a cage. So ask yourself, whose dream are you chasing, and whose nightmare keeps it alive? How much of yourself have you sold just to stay alive? In capitalism, labor is not just work, it's sacrifice. You don't simply trade hours for money. You trade presence, passion, potential. Every job has a hidden cost, and it's not in the paycheck. It's in your nervous system, your relationships, your fading sense of purpose. Marx called it surplus value, the profit that the capitalist extracts from your labor by paying you less than what you actually produce. The math is simple. The consequences are devastating. Think of a barista making hundreds of coffees a day, each cup sold for $5, but their hourly wage remains frozen. Their energy, their precision, their smiles, all converted into profit for someone they'll never meet. This is exploitation, but the system doesn't call it that. It calls it opportunity. Grind culture, hustle, words that wrap chains and ribbons. The manifesto doesn't demonize work. It honors it by demanding that it serve the worker, not the machine. But today, your labor serves a system that forgets your name the moment your shift ends. Imagine a man on a treadmill. He runs harder each day, convinced the finish line is just over the next hill. But the machine was never built to stop, only to measure how much you'll endure before you break. And when you do, you're replaced. Quietly, efficiently, like a worn-out part in a machine you never owned. The manifesto whispers you were never meant to live like this. So ask yourself, how much longer will you trade your life for someone else's wealth? What if the freedom you defend is the cage you can't see? Capitalism sells itself as the system of endless choice, 1,000 cereals on the shelf, 1,000,000 jobs on LinkedIn, a sea of streaming platforms, political parties, and products. And yet, underneath it all, the same wage labor, the same ownership structures, the same profit motive. You can choose your employer, but you can't choose not to work. You can switch your bank, your brand, your browser. But the core remains untouched. You are still serving capital, still trapped in a structure where your value is tied to productivity. Marx understood this illusion well. In the manifesto, he warns that as long as the means of production are privately owned, freedom is superficial. You may vote every 4 years, but you sell your labor every single day. Imagine a mall with thousands of stores, all brightly lit, each promising individuality. But behind every door is the same factory, with the same clock, the same boss, the same script. Be grateful. Real freedom isn't about how many brands you can consume. It's about whether you control the conditions of your own life, whether you can say no without starving, whether your dreams belong to you or to a market. The manifesto does not offer illusions, it offers rupture. It asks, what if true freedom only begins when the chains of wage dependency are broken? So look again. Is it really freedom if every path leads back to the same prison? Who controls what you care about? In the age of infinite content, attention isn't just currency, it's control. The ruling class no longer needs to silence ideas. It only needs to drown them. In noise, in novelty, in distraction. The Communist Manifesto isn't dead. It's buried beneath trending topics and algorithmic sedatives. Marx understood that ideology isn't just preached, it's packaged. It's the water we swim in, the news cycle, the Hollywood plot, the pop song that celebrates wealth while you ride the bus home after a double shift. You're not supposed to notice the contradiction. You're supposed to keep scrolling. Today, media doesn't just inform, it engineers desire. It tells you what success looks like, what failure means, and who is worth listening to. And somehow it never tells you to read Marx. Why? Because the manifesto doesn't sell. It exposes, it doesn't offer comfort. It demands confrontation. Picture a cathedral made of screens. Inside, people bow to brands. They repeat slogans like prayers. and above the altar, a banner reads, "You are free, but the doors are locked from the outside." This is not by accident. The media's job is not to awaken. It is to anesthetize. It turns rebellion into aesthetic, revolution into merchandise. Even radical ideas are neutered, so they can be worn without consequence. The manifesto cuts through this fog. It says, "You are not alone in your despair, because your despair is not personal. It is political." So ask yourself, if you were never shown the truth, how can you be sure you rejected it freely? What if the system isn't failing, but functioning exactly as designed? We're told capitalism is in crisis, that inequality is a bug, that poverty is a mistake, that burnout is unfortunate but necessary. But the manifesto reveals a darker truth. This system was never built for you. It was built to extract from you, to use you, to replace you. The growing despair, the rising rents, the generational debt, these are not signs of collapse. They are signs of success. For the ruling class, every foreclosure is a profit. Every layoff is efficiency. Every exhausted worker is a resource well spent. You feel like something's wrong because something is, but the lie runs deep. You've been trained to look inward, to blame yourself, to think, if I just worked harder, planned better, stayed positive. But what if it's not you? What if it was never you? Imagine a giant machine, its gears oiled with human hours, its levers pulled by invisible hands. You're inside, moving parts that make no sense for outcomes you'll never see. You hear the machine groaning, but you're told, just be grateful it's running. Marx didn't offer comfort. He offered clarity. The manifesto is not a map to utopia. It is a torch. To see what you were never meant to see. To name what was always hidden. And now, perhaps for the first time, you see it clearly. The system isn't broken. It was built to break you. So ask yourself, will you keep feeding the machine? Or start learning how to dismantle it? Maybe you felt it too. That quiet ache in your chest when you wake up already tired. That hollow silence when you wonder if your life belongs to you, or to something else entirely. Maybe you've spent years believing the system just needed fixing, that if you found the right job, the right app, the right mindset, things would finally make sense. But what if clarity comes not from fixing the system, but from seeing through it? The Communist Manifesto isn't dead. It was buried alive beneath a world designed to make you forget your power. Now, you've heard its heartbeat. Now the silence has been broken. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Karl Marx. What have you been taught to accept that you never agreed to? Who benefits when you doubt your worth? What would it mean to live a life that isn't defined by profit? If this video opened your eyes, even just a little, consider supporting with a super thanks. It helps us keep this channel alive and this message uncensored. Subscribe for more deep, uncomfortable truths. The next video might not change your life, but it might finally explain why your life feels the way it does.